Welcome to Locked On Hornets, a live edition, emergency pod edition of the Locked On Hornets podcast. Because Woj broke it first, the Charlotte Hornets quick to confirm Michael Jordan reaching an agreement to sell a majority stake of the franchise to a group led by Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall. I'm Doug Branson of everyhornetsboxscore.com, alongside friend of the show, family of the show, and my co-host for the upcoming Locked On Hornets live draft special, David Walker. David, this settles it. I don't think Michael Jordan's coming back to play for the Charlotte Hornets.
Well, I mean, you never say never, Doug.
This would be the first step. If he wanted to do it, he would have to, he would have to relinquish probably all of his share of the Hornets. I'm kidding, of course. We're going to get into a lot. We want to do a little table setting, kind of get some details out there. The Hornets have a release, but then we've got a lot to talk about. We're live on YouTube right now, so if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I am checking this out, and we'll be responding to those throughout the show. And then I want to kind of go into what it means short term. So we're talking like Mitch Kupchak, the draft, free agency. We're talking Steve Clifford's future. And then I also want to talk Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller. I mean, we got to talk about that. But then long-term as well, we got to get into what this means for Charlotte's presence in the NBA, of course. So let's start with some details, David. The Hornets released a statement that Chairman Michael Jordan has reached an agreement to sell his majority stake in the Hornets to a group called the Buyer Group.
Great name.
It's the name of the group.
I mean, what else could it be?
It feels like they all got to the bank to do the deal, and someone at the bank said, okay, and the name of the buying group.
Or they just put that on there and they never changed it. They just left it.
Right. Yeah, we'll come back to this later. And they're like, yeah, forget it. Just go with it. So this buyer group is led by two individuals, Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall. Plotkin acquired a minority stake in the Hornets in 2019, along with Dan Sunheim, who is also part of this group. And it was reported at the time, and I don't know what Plotkin's individual share was, but it was reported at the time that that was a significant, whatever that means, minority stake in the program. And so now they have upped that to a majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets. So Plotkin has been an alternate governor since 2019 and is the founder and chief investment officer of Tallwoods Capital. So an investment capital, a hedge fund manager, essentially. And he's also joined by Rick Schnall, who was part of a minority group that had ownership of the Atlanta Hawks. And I don't know, we'll have to find out, is he still, can you do that? Can you own two pieces of two franchises? That doesn't seem like a thing that would be a thing. No. Also in this group, Chris Shumway, Dan Sunheim, Ian Loring, Dial Home Court Partners, which is a financing tool, a liquidity capital thing that the NBA established to help groups like this buy more of a franchise. So, it's hard. Like, we're talking about, and I saw Mark Stein throw a number out there, $3 billion. I mean, this is big money, okay? And it has to be liquid money. You can be rich on paper, but you got to be able to go to the bank and get this group together to say, all right, we're going to pull together $3 billion. Tough to do unless you are one of these people that are just super, super, super unbelievably, absurdly wealthy people. Otherwise, you have to put these groups together, and there are these arms of capital that the NBA has established.
And even then.
Even then, you got to have help. The names that people are throwing around that are a little bit more interesting in this group are North Carolina native recording artist J. Cole, who has been around this franchise. He and Nelly have both been around this franchise, although Nelly not listed here. So I don't know if he still has a piece of the Hornets, if he's still one of the minority partners. And then also country music singer-songwriter Eric Church, everyone. Eric Church, ladies and gentlemen, now in the ownership group. What do you think about those names?
I think this is a good move. I mean, especially now those aren't specifically tied to Charlotte per se, but definitely some North Carolina roots, both two basketball guys. I mean, J. Cole is one of the league's leading scouts for unsigned players, as we know, directed Caleb Martin to Miami. So maybe that he can help the Hornets in that form. But no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, as you said, it takes a lot of people to be involved and to pool that money together. And I do think, we'll get into it a little bit later, but MJ was obviously face of the franchise, tied to the region, and so we'll see how involved those two recording artists are. But it's a cool throw in, I think, for the region and for the team.
Okay, so let's talk about, I think, what people are most interested in, and that's how this is going to, the timing of this. How is this going to affect the upcoming, both free agency and the draft, the decision that they have to make? They have the number 2 overall pick. Is it going to be Scoot Henderson? Is it going to be Brandon Miller? Before we ever got on here to do this live show, we released an episode of the podcast that literally dropped. I hit send just minutes before Woj made this
That's
report.
what they were waiting for. They were waiting for you guys. All right, here we go.
Well, Woj has got his people monitoring our houses, waiting for us to drop this news. Yeah, Friday news dump. Fridays are going to Friday. They're undefeated, never lost. And the Ja Morant news also dropped, but dropped after the MJ news. That's a news dump. That's Inception news dumping.
It went Lending Tree, RIP Lending Tree. Thank you for your service.
The Lending Tree clearly in it for the MJ, by the way. They wanted to meet MJ once a year, and once that was done, they were like, all right, we're not going to be on the jersey anymore. If we're not alongside MJ, we're not interested. Yeah, so we've got news dumps on top of news dumps. Michael Jordan reportedly is going to be involved in the basketball decisions around the NBA draft, around free agency, because this deal still has to get approved. Now, I don't expect any hiccups in this deal. I mean, the NBA and the Board of Governors, they're going to want to check the money. They're going to want to make sure everybody's anteing in, but I think this has been a long process. It's not a surprise. If you're just tuning in, we've been talking about the potential for the sale, and none of these names are surprising. The celebrity names are fun, but none of the big names are surprising. Plotkin, right. Schnall. So they've been working on this for a while, and I think this is a bit of a formality, I's dotting, T's crossing, okay? But it is going to take some time, and until then, you've got a leadership group in Jordan and Kupchak that are going to be making decisions for this franchise that could affect this new ownership group. That's what's really interesting. What's also interesting, David, is that Plotkin is involved. He doesn't have it. I don't know that he has any real basketball decision-making power, but maybe he has a little bit more now that he's going to take the team over in a majority sense. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and you would think they, had a seat at the table or have been in some of these meetings or will be in some of these meetings around the draft and regarding who they would like to select. I mean, do you think that's why some of these workouts were closed off? I don't know. Maybe not. But you would think they're definitely going to have some input. But I mean, MJ, Mitch, and the team who have been doing the work are still going to be the main voice in the very, very short term, right? Like through next week, even into the summer. I mean, that core is still going to be the main decision makers, it feels like. But it's certainly, if you're plunking down, listen, we watch Succession, right? If guys are willing to strike a check, they're gonna be in the room in some form or fashion.
That's right, and I think there is going to be a little bit of motivation to take care of the franchise. I've been begging Mitch Kupchak and company. I just want you, just hands at 10-2. Don't wreck the car. This is a loaner now. Don't mess anything up. Return it without a scratch to this new ownership group, and I think. There's going to be some motivations there, but it is interesting anytime you have a group of people making decisions, future decisions that aren't necessarily going to be as big a part of the future, because we don't know what the future for Mitch Kupchak is. No. We do know, based on reports, that Michael Jordan will have still be an alternate governor. He's still going to have a stake in this team. But I think it's going to be more of a financial stake, not necessarily a basketball decision-making stake. Although we don't know. We don't know. But I would venture to guess, just based on Michael Jordan's, I would say, interest in being hands-on involved with the team. It perks up at certain points in the decision-making process, like draft and free agency. But overall, I would say his interest has waned a little bit. So I think if you're an alternate governor, it might even wane a little bit more. He's been very interested in being involved in the NBA, but not necessarily like the Hornets day to day.
Right. Right. If I had to guess, Doug, I mean, that will remain the same. I think it behooves the NBA, and Michael and the team, to be involved with with the broader view of the league and the NBA. I think they'll still want to have that in place. I mean, I was listening to FNZ on the way in. Brett Jensen reported he had heard all the way through and expected it to be a 49% ownership. So it's going right under the line to alternate governorship. We'll see how it shakes out, but it's not like he's going to be the GM. Right. They're not going to put Michael Jordan in charge of basketball decision making per se.
Right.
He may still have a hand in things like the draft and free agency and things like that. To what degree, who knows? But I mean, right now he will. But moving forward, I think he's still going to be a part of the Hornets' overall organization. Perhaps he's a face of the franchise. Perhaps they still bring him in when they want to make a big deal about something. We don't know.
Well, look, 49 is right at the line, David.
Yeah.
But it's not 50. It's not 51. And that means that whoever has the 50, this is succession, by the way. It is, can the group all come together and overrule Michael
You've got
Jordan?
the votes. If you don't have them, you're out.
If you don't have the votes, that's right. But it does mean that if everyone wants to overrule Michael Jordan on a decision that he feels strongly about, they've got the stake. The buyer group can come in and make those calls.
Maybe he just needs one or two. Maybe he pulls one or two over to his side. You
never know. This could get. I think we need a documentary team in there to do Succession season 5 or whatever they're on. So here's the thing. I think typically when new ownership groups come in, it's not great news for the current general manager, Mitch Kupchak, who we were already a little unsure about his future in prior years, and then we got the news that he had been extended, but there weren't a lot of details around that. And so, I can't imagine that this new ownership group won't want to come in at some point and clean house, essentially. Right. What do you think that means for Steve Clifford, who we're pretty late in this process, right? I mean, would a coaching change make sense at this point?
Well, ironically, it's about the same time of year last year when Kenny Atkinson accepted and then stepped away. So the timing's not unheard of. But
there's no backup to the backup. Clifford was the parachute. There's if
he's their guy.
Right. Here's the thing. If the parachute fails, you go to the backup parachute. That's Steve Clifford. If the backup parachute fails, you're slamming into the ground at 100 miles an hour.
It feels like right now at where we are in the NBA year-long season, right? Continuity would be a plus wherever they can have it. And that's what the other thing, we just don't, I mean, it feels like at this point, these talks have been going on for the better part of a year. I mean, right. If you think back to when Mitch was, and I'm speculating, we don't know for sure, but I mean, the whole Mitch continuation or contract extension that was just kind of thrown out there at the time, who knows what talks were going on then, what things they saw coming down the road. You know what I mean? This season was already just on the court. Last offseason and this season has been a whirlwind and it's certainly a journey of trying times for everyone. So, I mean, right now it just feels like, they'd have to, you're talking about going through the draft, going through free agency, going through summer league, and piling on top of that, building out a new front office and coaching staff. It feels like a lot between now and, October.
Let me go ahead and play the music just so we're safe, okay? Because we're going to do a lot of speculating over the next, 30 minutes or so. So
and again, we're just speculating here, but this is experience speculation.
Okay, now we're safe. We can continue to speculate. Thank you. I don't think it's good news for the front office. I'm with you, though. I think it's a little late in the process because, again, this all has to get approved. We don't know what that timeline is going to be like. We do know from the reports that Michael Jordan is going to be in charge through at least the free agency period, which is, beginning of July through question mark. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it would make sense because all the good names, well, Kenny Atkinson's still available, but all the good names have been scooped up by other teams. So it wouldn't
Right.
make much sense. Now, I'm not saying it's an impossibility, but I think if you're this new ownership group, you would be smart to retain Steve Clifford for one more season because you have flexibility in his contract. If you want to move on after that, then you can, but he has a good relationship with the players. I just think it would make a lot of sense. Let's shift to the other thing that people are interested in, the draft. How do you think this affects the decision that they have to make, which is essentially come down to Scoot, Brandon Miller, who are still, as far as we know, set to meet with Michael Jordan on Monday.
Right.
Jake Fisher of Yahoo reported that. We talked about that on the actual episode that we released. Or trade the pick. How do you think all of this influences that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just such a short window. It doesn't sound like this sale or everything would be tied up by the draft. And like I said, it's not like these talks have not been ongoing. It feels like whomever was in place during the workouts, during the interviews, during this whole process,
they knew.
is probably right.
Well, because
exactly.
Scoot almost leaked it.
Was asked
Or
about
Scoot's
it.
team
Yeah,
almost leaked the confirmation of the news. I mean, there were, he was saying that he's interested in the prospect of joining Charlotte and the new ownership group, and everybody was like, okay, well, we've kind of heard that, but we didn't know that was a done deal. So yeah, I mean, it's obvious, and I think I've read some other reports as well that they were telling both camps, Henderson and Miller, hey, just know this is coming down the pipe. Is it pipe or is it pike? Is it coming down the pipe or is it coming down the pike?
It's pike.
Now, what's that? What's a pike?
Well, now you get one free answer. I'll come back to you.
Okay, go on. How do you think?
Save that for the live draft show.
Okay, but here's my
question. I don't think it's a big change. I don't think it's a big. They're not.
You don't think this?
lanes.
Okay, you don't think this influences the idea of trading that pick for like a big contract? Because I think this actually would. So, like if you're the new ownership group.
Well,
you want those books as clean as possible. You want the slate, like you want to compete, obviously, because a winning team makes money. Okay. Yeah. But you also, I don't think you want Bradley Beal's contract. I don't think you want Zion's contract.
Oh, away from trading, you're saying.
Yeah. Moving away from trading for a giant contract.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the questions I have is how fast and how severe does the new ownership syndrome take hold, right? Like how do they want to make a big splash? Do they want to bring in a big name with that big contract? With some of these guys having experience in the NBA, it feels like they are, versed in those type of things and what that might do. And as to your point, looking at the books. So yeah, if there's one option that I think maybe out the window, I guess you would say the trade. But then again, if they wanted to make a big splash by bringing in a Zion, they really wanted to do that, kick off next season with LaMelo and Zion, I could see it going the other way. But I think however they were leading, however they're progressing down this draft road, they'll continue to do that due diligence. I don't think with this news coming out, any more weight is put in any one area. You know what I mean? I think the work that was being done will continue, and this getting out there, I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on exactly what they do on draft night.
Yeah, and I think people will overestimate the influence that the new ownership group will have. I think Michael Jordan still owns the team, okay? Yeah. And he's still the decision maker. He is still the decider. And Mitch Kupchak is still going to run that war room. And they're not going to – I think they're going to run it like, hey, I'm going to make the best basketball decision because these characters, they take a lot of pride in what they're doing.
And MJ's still going to be here, right? By all accounts, in some form or fashion. His name is still going to be tied to the Hornets. And you can't tell me some of this, a good bit of this is say, yeah, I'd still like to be involved. I'd still like to be connected to the franchise when and if they ever do turn this thing around. And if it's the guy that I helped choose, that comes in and sparks a change, even better. So I think there's still motivation for him to positively impact the team.
Okay, we've got a lot more to get to. I want to talk about the long-term impacts of this decision. I want to talk about why Michael Jordan is doing this. And we've got David Walker, who really is our show's resident Jordanologist. You've been a fan of Michael Jordan for a long time. You've been paying close attention to his career as a player and as a front office person, and now as a owner of an NBA franchise. And so I want to get your feelings on that and how this is all developed historically. But first, I want to go to the chats because people have been blowing it up. Nick James says, "Don't mess it up on your way out, Mike." I think that's going to be the overwhelming sentiment of this news.
And again,
is,
right?
Please don't do anything disastrous before this new ownership group takes over.
Right. But and again, he's still gonna have an office in the building, guys. I don't know if he'll be like Coach K and keep his third level floor all to himself. But I think he'll still have a key to the building. You know what I mean?
12B here. I do know what you mean. 12B here saying, Topo from Rip City. We have had so many fans from Portland, some Blazers fans, some Charlotte fans that are in Portland. I swear we get comments every day from Portland, New Orleans, all the people pecking around the Charlotte Hornets in this draft. Their fans have come to check this show out. I say, welcome. But just keep your eyes off of Scoot. Keep your hands to yourself, eyeballs down on the ground. Don't even look at Scoot. Look at Scoot. Okay, but seriously, thanks for watching. Let's see, Kevin, are they still signing Miles Bridges? Okay, I didn't even have that in the rundown, but yeah, that's an important one. They've got 2 free agency decisions, right? Miles Bridges, restricted free agent, and they've got the free agency for PJ Washington as well. David, I'll throw that to you. What do you think this means for either of those decisions, which should be helmed by Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak?
Right. Exactly. I mean, if we're still saying these guys are carrying through free agency, then it sounds like to me, well, you know, whatever the thinking was going into this remains pretty much the same. Obviously, you're going to have some new voices in the room. If Eric Church, you know, feels like PJ is not developing fast enough with that corner 3, you know, it may be a different direction. But yeah, I think MJ and Mitch, and you know, that's another reason. Unless these guys have already had conversations, right, Doug? Like unless they were talking to Bob Myers for the last 2 months and being like, now listen, Bob, as soon as this goes through, pack your bags. You're no longer a West Coast guy. You're coming to Charlotte. Or hey, you can still remote work is in now, Bob. You could stay on the West Coast and just zoom into Charlotte, whatever you want to do. Unless that's the case, you know, I still think however they were working this thing and however they were building it would continue to be. But look, new owners, there is a certain unknown when there is a majority new voice in the room.
There is a certain unknown, but at the same time, we know who's making this decision, and that group has really, in every way that they could without getting in trouble, signaled that retaining Miles Bridges is going to be a priority. And honestly, also for PJ Washington. Now, I think there are some financial realities around the PJ Washington deal that may prevent it from happening, but I don't think it's going to have anything to do with new ownership. And we also have to mention this. Let's talk about who they're selling to, mainly the 2 names at the top of the list, Plotkin and Schnall. These guys are finance guys. They're in the world of investment capital and hedge funds. I say that to say this. I don't know. I'm not going to like speculate on what Plotkin's like morals are or what Schnall's morals are. Okay. But they're not selling to someone like, you know, Gail Benson, who is the owner of the New Orleans Pelicans, who is very vocal about her beliefs and about her emphasis on integrity and morality. And it's what is leading people to speculate that Zion Williamson might not be long for New Orleans because Gail Benson doesn't want to put up with that. I don't get the sense, without knowing for sure, I don't get the sense that that's going to be an issue for Plotkin and Schnall, who have spent their lives focused on making money. And if they feel like retaining Miles Bridges is going to make the franchise money, then I think they're going to do it. However you feel about that being what it is, that's just sort of my read on this situation. So I don't think that this new ownership group is going to come in and go, hey guys, that's going to be too big of a PR hit for us, so don't do that. They'll figure it out. Just like if Michael Jordan had decided not to sell, this organization was going to figure out how to sell that to fans.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot. There's just so many unknowns. You know, you talk about making money though. I did. You know, the numbers are getting floated out there. It sounds like MJ is about to net $2 billion off the sale.
Cool, $2 billion.
Like so, you know, that was a good look. And I was also reminiscing, or I should give credit to Brett Jensen and FNZ. Again, they mentioned this, you know, when he was first involved in trying to get a majority stake, he went to people like Oprah and Tiger
Yeah.
And he was, and they said no. And so, MJ can now go back to them and say, "You're welcome, Nelly." And I told you, Tiger and Oprah.
Well, we have to point out the significance of what happened today. There is only one black owner of a professional sports franchise, and that was it formerly was Bob Johnson, who owned the Bobcats, and then sold
Right.
to Michael Jordan. And so now, while he'll be an alternate governor, now we return back to a situation where there are no black owners of sports franchises, and not that Michael Jordan buying the team or Bob Johnson buying the Bobcats or owning the Bobcats when they got the franchise expansion, not that that ended that conversation. It just started
Right.
that conversation, but that conversation now we get to revisit it. And with the understanding that there needs to be more, because so many of these professional franchises are represented from a player perspective and not from an ownership perspective.
And I'll just say, we can talk about memories of the MJ era here in a bit if you want, but I would think
Oh yeah,
at the very top of that list is the overwhelming positive impact he made in the Charlotte community, the
yes,
Wilmington community, the North Carolina community, the NBA community. And the good news I think about this is I don't think this sale will affect any of that. I mean, he's still going to be involved in the Hornets. He's still going to be able to provide philanthropically here and in other areas. And so I think that is a big passion for him. He has done a lot of things that do go under the radar. He did that well before becoming a part of this ownership group through Nike and specifically through his Jordan brand, promoting executives and bringing people along in the leadership roles in that company. And so I think one of the highlights of his time here as majority owner of the Hornets was all he did, the voting at the arena, the solidarity stand that he made with the league during the first All-Star game fiasco and the bathroom bill and all that. And so he's just done a ton of stuff that should rightly be recognized. We all know it's about the performance on the floor. I don't think it measured up to his expectations or anyone else's. But to me, I think if you're looking for something that should stay consistent in a good way, I think it's his impact in the community and surrounding areas.
in total agreement there, and I think it's why it's important that he's still going to be. To me, this is best of both worlds for Michael Jordan. He gets to be alternate governor. I think his relationship with the team. This is actually a good segue, and I do want to answer some questions on the chat because I think there are some really good questions. But this is a good segue into talking about how we got here. Okay, so for those that don't know, Michael Jordan almost got a piece of this team before they were ever the Bobcats, but when they were the Hornets. Right after he ended his basketball career, he immediately started looking at opportunities to get into the league as both a front office person making basketball decisions, but also getting a piece of a team. And he was in talks with George Shinn to take a piece of the Charlotte Hornets as that whole situation was starting to unravel and move inevitably, it felt inevitable anyway, towards a breaking up of Charlotte and NBA basketball and that team moving to New Orleans. Had Jordan taken a piece, then I think that team probably stays in Charlotte.
And maybe he plays.
Well, there you go. And then you would have had the Wizards thing in Charlotte. It would have been a completely different reality. But do you recall, David? I do. Do you recall why that all broke down? Why Jordan didn't end up doing that?
Oh gosh, I do, but it's not coming off the top of my head right now.
Well, it's because he wanted to be in the front office. He wanted to have basketball decisions and that group. Because by that time, George Shinn, I hope I'm not boring anyone with this history. I find it extremely fascinating. But George Shinn had brought in this guy, Ray Woolridge, who had connections to New Orleans. Okay, so he really, helped push that move. But he had taken over some of that and didn't want to give up a lot of that control. And Jordan wanted really full control over the basketball operations, and the Hornets were not willing to do that. And so they said, be gone, Michael Jordan. Yeah, great move, George. Thanks. Appreciate it. So Jordan goes on, of course, and gets the Wizards front office gig and then eventually gets a piece of that team. All right, so fast forward to 2006, Michael Jordan gets a minority stake in the Charlotte Bobcats, gets some front office control, exactly what he wanted, but under Bob Johnson. Then he buys the team in 2010 outright for $275 million. You just mentioned, he's probably going to clear a $2 billion profit. How we got here, I think we got here in two ways. One, you had recent sales of the Suns and the Bucks that set the market price, okay? And so once that market price gets set, other people go, ooh, I would like some money, please. And so that seems to be a motivating factor. But also I think, Jordan has taken some other interest in like a racing team and other things. And I think the losing has taken an effect. Like all it takes to put a winning team on the floor, it hasn't been as easy. Maybe as he thought it was, or maybe it was exactly as hard as he thought it was, but it hasn't gone well. And so, he sold that minority stake in 2020 and now is giving up a majority of the franchise. So that's the history, David. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, and I think, we can dive into the psyche that is Michael Jordan. None of us can really walk in his shoes, although we do try. But, I think there was definitely, I think his biggest frustration from day one to whenever this sale goes through or whenever he leaves or whenever he continues on doing whatever he's doing is that he could not directly impact the game in the way he could as a player. Right. Yep. And especially these great players. I was just reading Larry Bird's book that he wrote when he was coaching the Pacers. And even then, this is like around the time that MJ retired from the Bulls the first time, Bird was talking about how frustrated he was with that era of player. Mm-hmm. I think there's a growing sentiment, and it's not like it's a secret. I mean, you hear retired guys all the time kind of pushing back on some of the new era of NBA players. They're not playing enough, whatever. I think there's a piece of that. Like there's some frustration, which I think is why he likes to be on some of these conversations with new players coming in. But some of the best stories and memories I'll have of his time here in this role was when he used to go out there and practice with the team, which sounds crazy. Like it's never that. When will we ever see that again? I guess maybe if LeBron buys a team, but he used to go out there and probably humiliate some guys as like a 50-year-old, and tried to hang on a little bit longer to some of that and put his imprint on this and do what he could. The talent just was never there. I think
he takes some responsibility for, I think people listening are going to go, hey, he's got some responsibility for that. He was in control of the team. He could have made moves. The allegations of him being cheap started very early in this process. When he took the team over in 2010, there were people were like, hey, are you going to spend the money required to make this thing happen? And he was having to answer those questions really from the jump. And I don't know that his actions really answered those questions in a kind of significant way, but you're right. He had a much more direct line to the players. He had a much more direct line and a visible presence that doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's rooted in the losing, but I think it's also rooted in trust. He doesn't talk to the media anymore. He doesn't believe that they're going to get the story right. He got burned by the Charles Barkley thing, essentially telling him he was a bad owner on TV of the Charlotte Bobcats. So, there's plenty of reporting on why the Hornets, if you go down the sort of media guide list of names that are in the executive suite, okay? Yeah. You don't have to play 7 degrees or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You don't have to play 6 degrees to figure out.
It's one hallway.
It's family or it's UNC or or it's family of family. Like the ties are pretty clear. So I think, go ahead.
Well, and that's a big reason that we've talked about some of his struggles. And I think it's from a standpoint of him being guarded, right? Only bringing in people that not necessarily are total yes men, but that he trusts with his whole picture, right? With everything they're doing, people he knows that he can trust, people that are on his inside, inner circle or right just outside that inner circle. And so that is a thing that I think will absolutely change. Obviously, you're talking about front office, not so much coaching staff, but I mean, within the building, we'll see. But I mean, I think that's been a big part of it. It was a big piece that, big reason he brought Mitch in. And Mitch had the gravitas and the experience, I think, in the NBA to kind of straddle that line a little bit, maybe not as much as some people would like. But it certainly brings an NBA resume from a GM office standpoint, and it matched up well with MJ still trying to keep that, you call it whatever you want, call it UNC. It's a big part of his life, but call it people that he's comfortable with having around.
Well, it's important to know, too, that the people that are coming in, I mean, other than Gabe Plotkin having been, around this team for a while, don't have those Carolina connections. Gabe Plotkin,
Exactly.
Rick Schnall, J. Cole does.
The same, right? I mean, the same, right? Like, Whitfield was, I think, a Nike Jordan guy. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, he was bringing in people with the utmost trust.
Yeah. And we should note that the celebrity names are going to get a lot of attention, but, like Jay-Z and the Nets, when you look at the actual percentages, it's most likely, we don't know, but it's most likely the celebrity names are going to be pretty, maybe less than 1% of that overall structure, but hard to say right now, but that's my guess. Let's go back to the chat. And I think this is a good question for what we've been pecking around right now. This is from Vapor Fox 25. Is this a net positive move or negative or too early to tell? So what do you think? New ownership group, majority ownership group, new decision makers, net positive, net negative?
Yeah, I mean, the one negative that's hanging out there that is the unknown is, does this increase the chances for a move at some point? You hate even to bring that up, Doug, but obviously with MJ being here, right, with MJ being here, and that's why I also think it's good. He's going to still have a stake, right, or still be involved, right. And has put down roots here. So I think if you're looking at it right now, I think to your point, Doug, it's probably the best of both worlds. He's stepping back a little bit. He can take some of that, hopefully take some of that heat, maybe off himself and just say, hey, you guys run this day to day. Happy to come in, give my 2 cents or put things when I want to. And it gives, hopefully, what you're hoping is a shot of life into the front office,
yes.
How they approach things, the PR, yes. How they deal with the fans, how they deal with the community, how they deal with the media here in Charlotte and otherwise, right?
The checkbook.
The
open the
checkbook.
Open the checkbook.
Right.
Yeah. No. This is
someone that's not Michael Jordan was probably gonna be more willing to spend. Whereas he's like, okay, show me something first, guys. I built a franchise in Chicago. I did all this stuff. These guys don't have to worry about that. They can go right to what's gonna make us good.
I think this is going to be an absolute net positive in the short term. In the long term, it's too early to tell. It's a bit of a question mark. So in the short term, I think this is going to be a good move because you are going to get not only an injection of new ideas, you're going to get an injection of investment. You're probably going to get a new general manager. Could that general manager be, I don't know, Bob Myers? He's out there. He's done some good stuff with Golden State. That's a name. I think these people are going to cast a wider net than we've seen cast before. You're going to get names of people, hopefully, that are the best talent out there to make these decisions. And hopefully it means more risk. Now, I know that scares some people, but I think this team could stand to be a little bit riskier. And I think to be a little bit more creative in how they perceive the ability of this team to improve. It's been one of my big gripes for the past couple of years. I didn't feel like Mitch Kupchak, and I thought this dripped down from the top. I didn't think that Mitch Kupchak really got on camera and said, hey, we're the Charlotte Hornets. We can win a championship. I'm going to tell you how, and we're going to do it, and I believe that. And we're going to stop at nothing to make that happen. That kind of energy has not existed, and I think the fans understand that. The fans feel that, whether they even know to express that or not. They feel a sense of irrelevancy. They feel a sense of a little bit of nagging hopelessness. And I hope all of that changes with new voices because I think when you take over a team, you're going to feel this need to reset. Okay, let's reset. Doesn't mean reset the roster because they've got a lot of young talent, but it means resetting the ideas. And I think the fans are going to, hopefully they'll respond to that idea because I think long ago, the mystique, the power that comes with having Michael Jordan, the name, own your franchise has dissipated. When he stopped showing up on the sidelines, when he stopped showing up to practices, when he stopped talking to the media as owner of the Hornets. All of that is dissipated. So I think this new group has carte blanche to come in and say, okay, we're changing things. And nobody's going to be like, well, that's not how MJ did it. Everybody's going to be like, yeah, that's not how MJ did it.
Well, and that's why these introductory press conferences and how they handle this transition, I think it's going to be fascinating. What is said, what's not said by the new leadership coming in, who's present at those introductory press conferences and resulting press conferences and communications and stuff like that. I mean, the bottom line is, Doug, anything could happen. They could have been having talks. They could have their eye on a young coach who's out there and not working or is taking a year off or whatever. I think anytime something like this happens, everyone is on high alert. But to your point, and what we've been discussing is, like, this is not a surprise probably to Steve Clifford, to Mitch, certainly not to MJ, like to anyone. Was it Fisher who reported there were rumblings of staffers being like, we don't know what's going to happen this offseason. Right. And if it wasn't Jake Fisher, I apologize. But some of these, draft blurbs that have come out, they've mentioned that. And this, you guys have been talking about this since what? Last year? Certainly since January, the possibility of this sale. So on some level, there may be some preparedness for this, but we just won't know until the deal is signed.
Absolutely. Lots of comments coming in. Let's talk a little bit more about the long-term impacts of the move, because you've got a lot of people with questions in that regard. Does this mean that a move away from Charlotte is imminent? There have been lots of rumblings around the NBA moving back to Seattle. There have been a lot of rumblings about a possible franchise in Las Vegas. LeBron retirement. Is he going to step into an ownership role and bring a team somewhere? It's much easier to move a team that's already established than to start that franchise anew. So could that happen? It is important to note that they have a lease with the Spectrum Center through 2045. That was signed pretty recently, and some big plans are afoot for a new practice facility that is alongside that lease. But let me throw a but in here, though. Okay. And I said this, I say this every time we talk about this. Okay. Just because there's a lease, it doesn't mean anything. Leases can be broken. Contracts they find a way when there's enough money and enough motivation and a big shiny new stadium somewhere else. Somehow these things figure themselves out. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it's an imminent thing in the short term, but to say that this doesn't mean that that's now a possibility or more of a possibility, to me, is naive.
Well, look no further than the last time it happened. Ray Wooldridge came in, and that's super simplifying it. Like, there was a lot of steps that then had to continue to go on down the road that led them to leaving Charlotte the first time. But again, that's why I think it is important and it is good that Michael Jordan still has a spot in the building and an office in there and a voice. If he's got 49%, he's going to have a voice in some of these meetings. And I just don't see him wanting to do that to this area, quite honestly. I think it would just be something that would really, really, you've said it before, it would probably kill the NBA in Charlotte. I know it would for several generations. Whether it would permanently, I think is certainly possible. So I think Michael, I wouldn't think he would want to do that. Again, I think he's giving a lot back to this area, and I think he would do everything in his power to keep it here. So in my eyes, it's very good that he's staying on for that specific purpose. Who knows, if those talks have come up? I would hope not, because if it hasn't come up, then that would mean it's maybe not certainly not on the horizon, but you just never know.
Do you think that this is the end of? Does this represent the complete end of Michael Jordan as the owner of a sports franchise? Or is this, do you think this is a temporary stepping away? Or do you think that someday in the future, short or far, he finds the love again? Like, for example,
NBA franchise?
Yeah. Well, no, for example, if the Charlotte Hornets draft Scoot Henderson and Scoot ends up leading them to an Eastern Conference Finals, maybe an NBA Finals in 5-6 years, alongside LaMelo and whoever else they have at the time. I mean, do you think all of a sudden Michael says, "Well, let me scrap around for another another billion, and see if I can just get those 2% back"?
I mean, unless, some of his business team says there's a really good opportunity, or hey, you know what? If LeBron calls with that Vegas offer, the stars could align there too. But look, he's already got his race team. He's on his fishing boat in Wilmington this weekend. He's got multiple billions of dollars to play around with. Pickleball is huge right now. Wouldn't be surprising to dip his toe into that area and maybe get a team or two. So, it feels like this has been a long 13 years for him. It's wild to think it's been 13 years where he's had, ownership or control of this team. But it feels like, getting back to what I was saying, just about like, the current players, there seems to be some level of exhaustion if you're just looking at it from not quite being around as much, can't get out there and practice as much, not as at many games, not here and there. Smacking Malik Monk on the head may have been the beginning of like, what are these guys doing?
No, now you I don't know if that was joking or not, but I think it is a serious point, and you made it earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. And I think something is worth watching if you really want to kind of get into Michael Jordan's head a little bit. And I've posted it before on the community page on YouTube, but it's an interview that's on YouTube that he did with
cigar aficionado,
right? And he sits down in this guy's humidor or whatever, and they're having rare cigars and drinking very expensive liquor, and they're talking about basketball and why. And part of the conversation is him extolling why he decided to get into the front office and get into ownership. And part of that motivation for him was to, as you said, influence a team on that level, influence players of the future. And I think you're right that he got into it and went, these guys aren't like me.
Yeah.
But this is the trap for anyone
and no one
that is
but
super talented, super great at things. We talked about this on the full episode that we did earlier. Michael Jordan's, I think, one of his issues in evaluating talent is that guys that are great at things have a tough time understanding what makes someone great because they were born great. They worked on it for sure, but there's something ephemeral. There's something they can't describe that's going on there, and they chased that. And I think they have a hard time evaluating if somebody else has that or not. And, I think a lot of the failures of players that have been drafted by this team that have not worked out have been centered around mentality. It's been less injury and more your Frank Kaminsky's, who Jordan was reportedly high on. Your Frank Kaminsky's falling apart mentally and confidence-wise, and Malik Monk doing Malik Monk things. I think those have been probably frustrating for him on the basketball end.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear someone in the NASCAR world kind of explain to us, because I think he's had certainly more success there, I guess you would say, however you measure that, than he probably has on the basketball court, just as far as winning. However, you stack wins up in that world. And, in that world, you got a driver, you got cars, you got engines, you got crew chiefs, you got crews, and basically you can throw money and testing and all this other stuff at whatever problems you have. Not to say that it's easy, but when you're putting together a basketball team, and let's face it, they have had some bad luck. Anthony Davis, they have not had a lot of good fortune.
What?
This year is one of those times, and that's why it's so important. But it just so happens when they've been in these positions, they've missed rather than hit when they have been in a position to make an impact. But they haven't gotten a lot of luck in that instance. And so it's just interesting to see where he chooses to spend his time over the next decade or so. It certainly feels like he's leaning over to that NASCAR world. He's got the golf, he can do whatever he wants. But again, it's good that he'll still be involved. It sounds like they want to, still have his name out there tied to the franchise. And I don't think it's the last time Adam Silver would call him. Like, I don't think if something happened, if something were going on in the league, I don't think that line of communication is shutting down.
That's important. I think that, to me, that's why this is the best of all worlds for MJ, because he gets to step back, but also keep his foot in the door of NBA decision making. Of, when we're doing CBA negotiations in however many years, 5, 7, whatever the next CBA is going to be signed, he's going to be part of those discussions. He still gets to be a face in the league. He's still involved, and I think that's super important to him. And I think the story of this is that became more important than the actual day-to-day operation of an NBA franchise. And so, now the priorities, I think, are going to be set correctly. So we got a couple of technical questions here. Z Birdie saying, how does one man owning 49% not have more power than multiple people owning 51%? Now, Z Birdie, I'm not an expert in how these contracts and how these groups come together, but what I would assume is that the buyer group, as it is so named, has 51%. It's not that Gabe Plotkin has this much and Rick Schnall has this much and J. Cole has this much. And now they probably have certain, there's probably certain financial realities that mean you get a certain amount back if you were to sell that piece. There are probably percentage breakups. But I think when it comes to decision-making, the buyer group probably, if this is being led by Plotkin and Schnall, they're probably going to be doing all the decision-making. Like within J. Cole's
voting, right?
Yeah, I don't think J. Cole's going to be necessarily voting on the day-to-day decision-makings that are happening. I mean, I think you're going to see Plotkin and Rick Schnall be the representatives of the team, and they would get the decision-making power here.
Yeah, that'd be my guess as well.
We've got more questions, people joining late, just wanting to know, how is this going to affect Mitch Kupchak? How is this going to affect the draft? Just to reiterate, I think, you and I are both in alignment that this probably doesn't mean great things for Mitch Kupchak's future with the organization, although we're unsure when that cord gets pulled. I'd say probably sooner than Clifford's cord. Like if you're going to make a move, because once the draft and free agency end, there is a bit of a lull. Now scouts are doing scout things and preparing for the future, but you could make a move at that point and bring someone else in to handle trade deadline that's going to come up, next February. Like there's going to be an amount of time there that you could make that move reasonably. And whereas a coach, that's going to be a tougher sled. If you fire a coach right before you're gearing up for the season, that would be seemingly more ill-advised.
Yeah. I mean, they're certainly tied, they're certainly tied somewhat together though. So, whether it happens at the same time or whether it's staggered or, who knows, but
we would not be shocked, right? If this happens, right. And it becomes official at the end of July. Okay. That seems early, but if this becomes official at the end of July, I don't think either of us or Walker Mail would be shocked if it was a full cleaning house and these guys had been talking to certain names, coaching names this whole time, with somebody waiting in line to come in and take over as soon as the ink met the paper. Okay, that would not be shocking. But I also wouldn't be shocked if Steve Clifford was retained at least for a year. But we'll see. So while I search for more questions on the chat, I just want to go into a little bit of feelings here because you are our resident Jordanologist. You've got the Jordans behind you there in the camera shot. You love the shoes. You love the man. You love the game. You love the player. And I don't know how you feel about the owner or the front office person, but how are you feeling now that Michael Jordan won't be part of just sort of your daily thinking when it comes to the Charlotte Hornets?
Oh, well, that'll never stop. But yeah, I think initial reaction to this was a little bit of sadness because you said that. I enjoyed having MJ as the owner. I enjoyed having him be part of our NBA franchise in Charlotte. But the 49%, involvement, if that is true,
you're holding on to it.
Will remain.
You're gripping.
Well, I think it's good for him, and I think it's good for like I said, the city and the team as well. But I think your point of maybe the best of both worlds is now what I'm gravitating towards holding on to, because I know there was a great amount of frustration from him, from the fans, from the team, from the community, from the media, like from everyone involved. There was a reset. There was a a recalculation that needed to be done almost from the top down in this team and this franchise, right? And we're looking at it right now. This is the most heated debate around the draft that I can ever remember because of the spot they're in, because of the players that are involved, because of the noise coming off Twitter. And there's a real possibility that come next Thursday, a very vocal portion of the fan base is really upset and mad. And I just don't know how that'll carry into the next season. I think it'll probably be fine because people will cool out. We'll watch something like or whatever. Right. But this team needed a kick in the butt. This fan base needs a shot in the arm.
These sickos.
And I think that a change can oftentimes bring that around. And if you're going to keep MJ involved, keep the Jordan apparel in the team store, keep the releases there.
Good point. Are you going to hold on to that? Because Jordan Brand was a big part of everything that went into the team store, and
I would imagine that would stick. I mean, look, the guy still got his logo on all of the jerseys in the NBA. He's not going anywhere.
Right. I want to go back to something you said that hit with me. It is sad, and I'll say why it's sad. It's sad because this had to happen. It's sad because we all feel like this is the right move. And yet we do. I think for most of us that have grown up in North Carolina and, Carolina fans or even Duke fans, or just all fans of Carolina basketball and the prestige that comes with that, have some esteem for Michael Jordan. And I wanted this to succeed, but I knew it wasn't going to. And honestly, if the Hornets, I'm a sicko, so I believe they'll win a championship someday. If Denver can do it, if Milwaukee can do it, Charlotte can do it. Sure. And if they win a championship someday, it's going to be a little bit like when we see Adam Silver hand the trophy to Gabe Plotkin. It's not going to be the same to Rick Schnall. It's not going to be the same.
Whispers into the ear.
Oh, God, yeah. Which one? Is it going to be Schnall or is it going to be Plotkin that pulls the cronky and just gets way too close?
If there's any justice, it will be MJ. And then he'll call Mitch down, and then he'll pull Steve out of the audience.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, is sure. Well, Michael Jordan, that's what's going to be interesting. If the Hornets do find some success, is Michael Jordan going to be content to play to be in the back seat, right? Because Plotkin and Schnall they're gonna hand those guys the trophy. Okay, I know people in the chat right now. You guys are insane. The Charlotte Hornets can't even win a playoff series.
I have to admit, that was not my first thought when I heard this breaking news.
You didn't think about. I dreamt it. I immediately took a nap before we did this live show, and in my dream it was Adam Silver handing Gabe Plotkin the Larry O'Brien trophy and Michael Jordan just kind of standing in the back like that. I can't even get my mind around that. But it would have been nice. It would have been nice for, Jordan to recreate the Larry O'Brien, hugging the Larry O'Brien, but as an owner. Like all of that would have been super cool. And we don't get that. But again, I think most of us recognize like this wasn't working. It wasn't going to work. And we needed this change to happen.
Yeah, it's also sad for the people who just like to blame MJ for everything, which I guess they could probably still do.
They'll blame him for 49% of things.
Exactly.
That's right. But a lot of people in the chat are saying, hey, look, Michael Jordan, think what you want to think about the decision-making, the draft picks, the lack of not spending on the basketball stuff, but he did do a lot in the community. I think we have to recognize that. And I hope, honestly, it continues, because if it doesn't continue, then I'll get a little cynical about it, honestly. If it doesn't continue, I hope he's still active.
Scandal-free. I mean, the best
not only scandal-free
they've ever had.
Well, not only scandal-free, but he navigated this franchise through scandal, as you mentioned, the bathroom bill, losing the All-Star weekend. He navigated this franchise through that in a way where you felt proud to be a fan of the team. Now, there's some certain things that have happened recently where you felt less proud, and one wonders if that's going to continue or not. We'll see. And maybe, and I thought about this too, like, having all of that happen and coinciding with Michael Jordan taking a step back. I wonder if those things are connected, if Michael Jordan were really like super involved and wanted, was really had a handle on this team, would all of that, would all this be happening? I don't know.
That
I'm
is a
speaking, of
great
course, of Miles
point.
Bridges, but
Right. Well, that's a great point. But you think back to the Robert Sarver stuff, right? It's rumored, right, that was the next line of communication that Adam Silver was going to go to, and like I hate falling back on the trope that MJ doesn't care about anything, because it's not true. He's done a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but he's not a guy that puts it out on Front Street. He never has been, which is fine. But you just wonder, in the environment and the climate we're in, there's just stuff seems to pop up a lot every day. And I don't know how often like Silver's picking up the bat phone to go directly to MJ. He definitely doesn't have the main number. He's definitely got like his second Motorola down the line.
right.
But how much does he want to be, as a majority owner,
Yeah.
the guy they always have to go to, first in line at the Hornets?
But people should understand this. They can't understand what's happened today without understanding that Michael Jordan, when he took over in 2010, did put it out on Front Street. He put it out on Trade and Try, and he had Rick Bonnell and other media members in his office to take pictures and have a long interview about what he was going to do to make this franchise a winner. That has not happened in years. So that's what I'm saying. Like that's when I say he's pulled back. That's part of what I mean.
I mean, like on the larger spectrum, just what it means to be an owner, and the most visible owner and the most famous.
He's
owner.
not Mark
Like,
Cuban. He never has
Right.
been Mark Cuban.
Right.
He never has been that figure, even though he was more open to talking. He never took that approach to it. You're right about that. But this is the news. This is what we're doing. This is how the team is moving forward. Still a lot of questions. You can't love the timing of this, whatever you think about it. This is 2 straight off seasons now that have been rocked by changes, by question marks, all around this team. This is not stability. And maybe that's another positive too, that maybe we'll go another off season or two without, earth shattering news to deal with as the Hornets approach the NBA draft. It's going to be very interesting. I implore you to subscribe to us on YouTube, set your notifications to on, set them to stanging, so that you can be alerted when we go live. David and I, and Nada Edwards, friend of the show, fam of the show, former co-host, and he's the producer of the Eye on College Basketball podcast. So we're really excited to have his expertise on the table.
His takes. We need his college takes.
We've got a fancy studio. I want to release some pictures on Twitter next week of the set. I'm really excited to get to Charlotte and be a part of that. Maybe in Brooklyn. I don't know. I'm giving it the weekend. If I don't get credentialed by Monday.
You'll do anything to avoid. You're like these draft picks. You'll do anything to avoid coming to Charlotte.
Well, they moved my, they moved Midnight Diner. That made me sad. I need to go visit now. It still exists. But it's moved, and that's I did get to take my baby there before they moved, so that was good. But things are changing in Charlotte. I think it's moving on without me. That's sad. I asked it not to, but it's moving on without me. And but I'll be there maybe. If they don't let me go to Brooklyn, so we'll see. But I will be on the show. I'll be calling in if I'm in Brooklyn. I'll be calling in. But it's going to be good. Make sure you have it. Make sure you have your notifications on. Really appreciate everyone for joining us here on this live show. Go back and listen to the full episode, because we talked about Mark Williams' thumb surgery. We talked about a lot of other things that were not Michael Jordan related. So that actually still is. Is there anything at this point? Thank you, David, for taking this time to do this live show. Appreciate it, buddy.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry for your loss.
Else.
I'm sorry for your loss of MJ.
It's just a 1% to 2% loss. I think I'll recover.
Well, it's a $2 billion. The $2 billion gain is your $2 billion loss. All right, we're going to be back on Monday with more. David's going to join us on Tuesday. Thank you so much for supporting this show. We really appreciate it. Until next time, go Hornets. Go America. Let's swarm Charlotte.